Welcome to the Wired for Wellbeing podcast, where we explore how understanding your nervous system can transform the way you live, love, and relate. In this episode, we're exploring one of the hardest challenges of love, watching someone you care about struggle and feeling your own heart ache and break right alongside theirs. You'll discover how to keep your heart open without it breaking you, and how grounding in your own body can transform helplessness into strength and love into something steady and healing. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Rutstein, a practicing clinical psychologist for the last 4+ decades. And over that time, my experience has been that we are inherently wired for well-being. We all hold the keys to greater happiness, ease, and connection in our lives. However, we are not taught how to access these capacities. When you work with your nervous system instead of against it, life opens up with more compassion, freedom, and ease. I'm joined by my good friend and producer, Steve Lessard. Steve, hi.
Hi, Jeffrey. Hi, everybody.
Each week, we use real questions from listeners like you as doorways to explore how we each can work with our nervous systems. Because while our stories differ, all our nervous systems speak a shared language. If you'd like to leave a question, the number to call is in our show notes. So let's dive in. Steve, what do you have for us this week?
The question I want to play today is from Christine, and I thought I'd play it, and then maybe we can have a discussion about what's going on.
Sure. Sounds good.
Hello, Dr. Rutstein. I much appreciate your work and am grateful to submit my question. My name is Christine, and my question is regarding emotional healthy balance in the face of the struggle and pain of a loved one. For background, my youngest son was 12 years of age when my marriage ended in 2003. My youngest son fell into drug addiction around 16 years old and has been on a cycle of recovery and relapse ever since. I have recognized a codependent pattern in myself over time and suffer emotionally when he spirals down into relapse. I have struggled with overwhelming guilt that the divorce contributed to his turning to drugs in the first place. I have been doing my own nervous system regulation and recovery work to navigate the realities of these painful circumstances and have gained a lot of good ground. What I would like to hear is your view on what is normal and balanced for the healthy navigating of emotions in the face of the struggle and pain of a loved one. Thank you.
Yeah, that certainly is a lot to navigate. Jeffrey, I wonder what stood out from you on that listening to Christine's question.
As a parent, my first sense was just pain, right? For any parent that has ever had to deal with a child that has struggled with addictions. But that's one particular way of it, but so many individuals deal with so many family members, friends, partners that have addictions to substances and follow the same path of working at getting sober and then relapsing and becoming sober again and then relapsing. And it's of course a very hard struggle for the person who's addicted to go through, but it is super hard, super painful, super challenging for those who care about the individual. So that was the first thing that hit me, was just that this Christine is dealing with a lot of pain that she's been dealing with for many, many, many years now. I mean, and also, Steve, there's another piece of pain here too that even before we get into the deeper nervous system, look, just the idea of a particular, Christine is not unusual at this in either, in feeling some bad outcome happens to someone we care about or love. we will search ourselves to see, did I contribute to that? Did I not pick up when they were maybe leaning into use before? Or did our upset or did our divorce or did something else contribute to the pain that drove my loved one into this cycle? And so there's, of course, the whole universe of pain of just having to watch someone love go through this. But then there's a whole other large region of pain we open up by also feeling some blame, some responsibility, some guilt or shame for the situation the person's in. That can create both a psychological and nervous system bind in some ways.
Yeah, I don't have children, and I can touch the ocean of suffering that you just want your loved ones to be safe and happy, and that story that's got to come along with that. Even not for children that I don't have, just for loved ones. So yeah, feeling that deeply. So let's go into like some of the nervous system pieces here. Like what do you hear is happening, maybe behind our awareness?
If I may, let's start with Christine's awareness, which is great. Christine, you should be very proud of the awareness that you have of this situation. And I really want to honor your effort in working on yourself with this. Christine has shared that she's aware of nervous system dysregulation, that it's something that she has tried to work on in herself because she has to witness and withstand what her son is going through. And I think that for any of us, that would be stressful. And she's asking, well, how do we relate to this in a healthy way? And what we're asking here too is that, getting back to your question, is, well, what's really going on in the nervous system here? And so I think that there's several things that are playing out simultaneously that raise it. So one thing is, Christine has shared what she observed is that she gets very upset when he is going through more distress, going back into relapse, not being able to maintain healthy relationships to substances or abstinence. So she gets disappointed and fearful that harm is going to come to him. But here's the but. So many people that I've worked with can fall into this bind. They feel terrible for the person who's suffering, but they don't have as much access to their anger about it. And our fight energy is a message. It's not like good parents have to get angry, but good parents, loving parents, do get angry. And again, I'm not talking about how we express that to another person. I'm just talking about being aware of it in our own process, being aware, oh, I have anger here. And what I'm aware of, Steve, and what Christine is mentioning is that this guilt about maybe the divorce had some part in driving him into the addictions means that when she feels terribly upset about his situation, she's going to feel anguish and despair for him, and she's also going to feel shame and guilt for her, for causing this very horrible thing that has been, quote unquote, the biggest problem in her son's life. At least that's how a lot of nervous systems will relate to this, right? I want him to be good and I want him to feel well, and I'm so upset with myself that I contributed to this or didn't stop this. And why I'm mentioning this piece about anger is because when I'm sometimes working with a very, very suicidal person and they're in deep despair and I'm not sure that they're going to be able to remain safe, right? I will work at forming a very safe and secure connection with them in that moment, giving room and space for their despair to be held in some way emotionally, to really give them a lot of space to these feelings, this anger, this self-loathing, which is really important to work out. There are patients who will report similar things, talk about similar things, but it will feel to me as a clinician a bit more manipulative, a bit more like they're angry at me because I went away on vacation, or they're angry at something that happened with their spouse. And while the desire to hurt themselves is just as real in some ways. They may more be saying it, and I'm saying this very carefully because only some people do this, not many. They may be saying it more to get a reaction, for someone to see how great their pain is, versus because they're actually at the edge of the cliff. Now, no one should be making that decision ultimately unless they're a clinician. That's a very dicey one. But one of the things that I use from my own nervous system is if I begin to feel any sense of irritation in the way that someone is talking about something that usually has my heart and attention fully captured by what they're talking about, I'm really connected with their pain. And there's sometimes people who are talking about pain, but they're talking about pain as if it's the weather. They're talking about pain as if it's not immediate to them right now. And one of the pieces about if I realize that I have a little bit of frustration is that actually in this case, this person needs a little bit more strength in me to confront what's going on, because my frustration with them is telling me that a little something else is afoot here, and they're strong enough to receive a little bit of confrontation or clarification. When I am feeling the absolute at death's door that someone might be in my office and they're just millimeters away from dying or taking their life, I am very different in that situation. It's not ever a trace of anger or frustration, and there is actually an amazing sensitivity to their fragility. I'm going on this long tangent because when you relate to someone who is in addiction, at some point, it's a nervous system dysregulation for them. It absolutely is, right? Anyone who's addicted, and depending on substances, is using it to regulate their nervous system to help them move out of despair, self-hatred, despondency, aloneness, or to help them feel less anxious or less enraged all the time so that they can escape their pain. And the pain is coming from their nervous system activation. So this is a long way around of saying that if we are in a bind and if we're feeling guilty about someone's situation, we will not feel entitled to access our own sense of fight energy, our own anger. That will feel not caring enough in that moment. But if we at least allow for the possibility, we can take in some data. So I'm saying this because Christine may at times not know what to do with her frustration or may not always be in touch with it. But her frustration may also help her see the difference about the path that her son has to do, right? She can support him to an extent, but ultimately he has to be the one that makes a decision about the quality of the way he wants to live. And then this goes back to a really deep piece of this, Steve. And I don't know if I should pause here because I went a long route around here. Did that feel like it made sense for you before I go into this other thing?
Yeah, that did make sense. I have a couple of follow-up questions, but I actually don't want to stop your train of thought. If I'm honest, I'm interested to where you're going right now.
Refocusing on Christine's question, like, what would a healthy relationship look like here? Or what would be a healthier way to balance this? I want to say absolutely that it would be natural to be brokenhearted and despairing about this. Absolutely. And tormented, right? And that's inevitable if we are deeply attached to and love someone and they are going through such an obviously difficult place that they are now partaking in maintaining or sustaining or relapsing. And so it's important that when we are allowing ourselves to feel our despair or our guilt, we also have room for any other feelings that come up, like irritation or anger. And this is not to say to, harm your son in any way. This is about using your awareness of anger as information about what your nervous system may feel and need to feel a bit more settled in this.
I can only imagine the amount of guilt that might come up by feeling angry from the situation. And and when it's your child and when they're going through their own challenges, I don't know, where do you put that? Where do you set that guilt aside and realize what's at the root of it? And you're actually angry at the situation and your anger is valid and it can be something that helps mobilize you.
Yes, yes. So you're right that our guilt and our shame will tell us not to be angry. Will tell us to be despairing and despondent in ourselves, which will make us feel like we just have to sit there and suffer. And I think that many of us have always sort of equilibrated the idea that loving for someone means feeling certain ways, or some families, even a little bit of enmeshment. That if I love you and you're really, really distressed, I should be distressed too, right? I think that a lot of us think of it this way. And so it's one thing if you're going through a loss and it's, 3 months, 6 months, a year or two, right? But even something that begins to get 3 years, 4 years, 5 years in length, it's hard for us to always stay in that attuned, I'm going to support you every moment thing, especially if it feels like one crisis after another crisis after another crisis. And we're the powerless bystander. I can take you to your appointments, or I can help pay um, some inpatient treatment or whatever, but I can't be around you 24 hours a day and stop you from picking up something to use again or abuse again.
So where do we start to draw that line then? Like, what are some cues that, in Christine's case or other individuals' case, we might use as markers along this path?
Well, I want to talk first, I guess, about a little bit of an ideal and then maybe how to get there.
Great.
So, we have fight, flight, and shutdown, those defensive states. And we also have this window of tolerance where we can be in regulation. So the ideal position for us to live our life, to care for our family members, to do our job, to take care of our kids, to walk our dog, to floss our teeth, the best place that we could begin to live our life from is if we have a couple of toes in regulation. We don't have to be totally regulated, but if we're just a little bit regulated or a little bit more regulated than they are right now, two things happen. We actually begin to have a different sense of what's possible. And we get a little less caught up in the dramatic pull of the moment. Because when I'm regulated, I'm not just chasing after something like a dog after a ball instinctively. I'm trying to see, okay, well, what's going on here? I can get a little curious. What's happening? And so if Christine can have a couple of toes in regulation during these times, these very difficult times, and it will be a challenge. One of the things to do is to really notice both the way that her nervous system is getting pulled into her son's. And at that point, she's also beginning to see what many of us have, which is this iterative, this bouncing back and forth like a ping pong ball between my activation and the other person's activation. And then my activation goes higher and then the other person's activation goes higher. And we keep bouncing into this. So I'm inviting Christine to also notice if when she gets into this, as she notices her nervous system getting more activated, going more into fight or flight or shutdown, does she also begin to notice her son's nervous system becoming more dysregulated too? Or maybe he was already dysregulated and doesn't get any more dysregulated, that no matter how much dysregulated you get, but that's less likely. Once people are hot, they're only going to get hotter. So first is paying attention to the actual cost in the moment. And the cost, I mean, is paying attention to how this feels in the nervous system. Are you getting incredibly angry? Are you getting incredibly numb? Are you feeling hopeless? Do you feel hateful in that moment? Do you feel like you wish this would all go away? And they're all normal feelings, but it's helpful to kind of know where they are. And more important, not just the emotions, to track the nervous system state, right? To track the energy in the body. The second step, you name and notice first where you are. The second step is finding some way to come back in. Now, again, I'm fond of doing quick things like hand to the heart or two hands to the heart, and actually just allowing yourself to linger with sensation, closing your eyes and taking a few slower breaths with a longer exhale than your inhales. And doing that for a few moments will give you a chance to settle a little bit. And just in doing that, right, you have more resources that we lose the moment we get all riled up by our nervous system when we're in conflict with someone else. And then we keep repeating patterns. We all do this. We keep repeating old patterns of how we each fight. One fights by aggressive, one fights by withdrawal. It goes back and forth. It can happen in all different ways, but fighting never resolves anything. It just deepens the dysregulation and deepens the disconnection. So name and notice, find a way to touch back in and put a couple of toes in ventral. And then ask yourself, what's the most loving thing you can do for them and you right now? What's the most loving thing you could do for them and you? Or actually, you should put for you and them, put you first. What's the most loving thing you can do right now for you and them? Sometimes it's me walking out of the room. If I'm at a place with my wife and I know I'm just going to start getting angry and spouting off, I'll take a break. I'll walk away because I know me, and I know that in the past, if I get angry and I stay there for a while. There's no use in talking to me when I'm like that because it's not going to calm me down necessarily. And so I think that a loving thing to do is I spare my wife a fight and I spare myself the embarrassment of saying things because I was really pissed off and didn't need to. And I know in 5 or 10 or 15 minutes, I'll be fine. I can talk about it. But sometimes the kindest and most loving thing to do is to walk away. Sometimes it's just to break whatever's going on there. Hey, can we take a break? Can we talk about something else? Or do you know what you want for dinner? To switch it to a non-conflictual, non-argumentative stream. And again, those may not work. The issue here is, and the real question is, what can you do primarily for your nervous system? This is not going to have a huge and dramatic impact on the other person's nervous system. It can have a small one in helping them settle a little bit, in helping them be less regulated. But the main thing is you want to also be able to model for your son that there's a way of living life where one doesn't have to be tormented by their nervous system all the time. So, Steve, first of all, did this kind of take you where you wanted to go? And what are those questions that were lingering around from before?
Yeah, you did a pretty good job of mopping up some of the questions that I had, and it did go where I wanted to go. And I wanted to share like this image that I had as you were giving some advice was like this tangled nervous system ball with all these tentacles. And that was maybe her son, and another tangled nervous system ball. And maybe it's dysregulated, which is why it feels tangled and noisy. And I just sensed it, like how connected they can be sometimes, or seem, maybe how connected these nervous systems can seem sometimes, and how maybe that starts to run the script instead of what our own nervous system is doing, or understanding what the other person's nervous system is doing. Does that make any sense?
Yes.
Is there like a 1 + 1 equals a new thing, a 3 here?
1 + 1 can sometimes be 1.
Yeah.
2 nervous systems are 1, and they're mine, or they're yours, or they're ours. It depends on, the perspective. I think that that's a very true perspective. I think that it's hard for us to be around a dysregulated nervous system. And it's hard for us to be around one without us tending to go in one way or another dysregulation ourselves, either get activated along with them or kind of go into collapse and disappear to get a little distant from them, right? But then also there's this play of the energy of guilt and shame. And I think that this is a little bit more shame than guilt, just because the way it's hung over her and the way it kind of feels causal. Because she didn't cause this. The divorce didn't cause this. At best, at most, it was a factor among many, because there are millions and millions of people, children whose parents get divorced and they don't go to drugs, and millions of kids whose parents stay together and they do go to drugs. So it's not a direct correlation. But of course, there's stress in families before there's divorce, and increased stress does increase pressure and stress on kids. But again, that in itself is not the thing. So you focusing on that as the thing is sort of taking unto you what's actually a blinding burden. And I mean it's a blinding burden because it'll make you focus on what you've done to put him in this way, and it actually lets him off the hook. It lets him off the hook of having full responsibility for this, because part of you that feels blamable for it, and part of you that may even allow him to blame you for this. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not talking to you beyond the lovely voicemail you left. But these are the things that come to mind. And I think that your shame around this is the piece that's kind of continuing to hold you back and probably feel a little bit more dysregulated around this. And that's going back to, Steve, what you're just saying, which is that my shame will tell me, if you love them, then you must feel this way, tormented. Like, how can you possibly rest or feel okay if your child is going through this? And it's shame that tells us that. The reality is if I lose sleep and I get ill, it's not going to be any help to my child who's an addict. If I worry myself to death, if I make myself so depressed, my immune function, how is that going to help my child? Suffering doesn't. Our suffering for someone else doesn't alleviate their suffering. Our healthy ways of supporting them, and that's what we're talking about here. Christine can be empathic and compassionate to her son's pain. And she could also stand up for a lot of people who are addicts will, and this is not universal, but it's a generalization, that a lot of people who are addicts will blame outside circumstances for why they're depending on this. And that really only changes when full accountability is taken into, this is my choice, or this is what my behavior is being forced to do right now to manage my nervous system, right? Unless it's taken in, it's never gonna be healed. And we can't get anyone else to do that, right? Like, as a parent, even as a psychotherapist, I can't get someone else to own stuff. I can encourage them to do and tell them what can happen if they own it and what happens a lot of times when people don't own it. But it's each person's decision to do what they do. So I think that another piece that Christine would be well served by looking at would be her potential clinging to the sense of shame or guilt, that it may be an unconscious, unintended punishment for her, and also kind of making sure she's bound in a kind of despair. And her son is bound in despair. He's despondent in his addiction. She's despondent that she feels she may have contributed to his addiction.
I want to give Christine sort of a summary here of, like, where would you want to leave this call? What final messages or final outcome would you want to leave for Christine that you hope she takes from this answer?
Christine, I don't know you beyond this message, but I think you're doing a really good job in a really, really hard, painful situation that, unless other parents have kids in similar situations, they just won't grasp. I would absolutely continue on with your work in regulating and in practicing daily ways to come back to a sense of calm, ease, presence, more regulated, whatever that looks like for you. And to work on having compassion for you, and in particular, offering self-compassion to the part of you that's tormented by your son's state. And also offer some compassion towards his suffering. But start with you, because that's how you will both begin to soften shame's grip, and you'll be able to not have you dissolve while your son is working through his addiction. That could take him months or a few more years, or possibly the rest of his life. That's really going to depend on him and his choices. And in the meantime, the best thing you can do for both of you is to support your well-being in this. And that means taking care of your nervous system. And in particular, I'd add in some self-compassion work in particular.
Beautiful. Yeah, Christine, we're voting your victory over here. We're here to support and hope that this outcome gets to a place that is feels a little bit more grounded for you. And yeah, Christine, also just thank you for your willingness to send in this question and have this very vulnerable moment. And really do hope this was helpful. And Jeffrey, how can other people send in their questions, and where do they go? What do they do?
Christine, I too want to thank you again for your vulnerability and your honesty and your trust in sending in your question. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate you and your journey. Also, I wanted to shout out that your call is a gift because it opens us up to talking about what so many families suffer with. And I think it's really great to begin to open up this question to wider audiences who can understand it or begin to understand it from a nervous system perspective. If you would like to send a question, feel free to call 866-357-5156. Or if you can't reach that number, feel free to send an audio recording or just a plain email to hello@drjeffreyrutstein.com. And once again, I'm happy to announce that my flagship program, the Healing Trauma Program, created in partnership with Sounds True, is now open for registration. This program is offered once a year and will begin in February of 2026. So if you're interested, you can check it out. You can go to drjeffreyrutstein.com/links, and there'll be a link that'll take you to the Healing Trauma Program from there. Okay. Thank you all for joining us today. We really appreciate you spending the time. And if you felt this was helpful, tell a friend. Steve, thank you as always.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I really just enjoyed our discussion today.
Me too. All right, friends. Until next time. Bye for now.